Yeah, I think we can go ahead and begin then. All right, well, welcome everybody. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website and on the Albemarle County calendar when available. All right. So let me just get the. So I just want to go ahead and welcome our guests here. We've got some attendees. We've got Sean Tubbs and Tom Chapman, and Josh Press Williams. So welcome. And we'd be happy to hear from you also. So you can just let Carolyn know if you'd like to speak, and she will make that available to you. And we are going to go ahead and review the agenda. And did everybody get a chance to take a look at that?
Yes, I did. I did have 2 items that hopefully we could add to that agenda.
Yep.
So it'd be nice to discuss. I didn't see stream health on there, and it'd be nice to discuss the solar policy again.
Yeah.
Or we could just do that under the policy committee. I assume the policy committee is on there. We could just do it under
the policy committee is on there. That would be great, Lonnie. That would be a good
seeing
place.
the agenda, Christine?
We are. Thank
Okay.
you. All right. Thanks. All right. Yeah, that Lonnie, if you can, I think we can definitely cover that when the policy committee reports. Because would somebody like to move to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented with the amendments.
Second, don't we need to do our proclamation first of the COVID-19?
I did it.
Oh, you did. Oh, I did not. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Send out.
Did it. All right, and let's go ahead and vote on approving the agenda. Kate? Do you approve?
Yes.
Great.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay. Emma?
Yes.
Thank you. Leah? Hey, Leah. You approve the agenda, Leah?
Oh, she disappeared.
Oh, she disappeared. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we've got Lonnie, Mike, Kate, and Emma. So I think we can go ahead and approve that. And we'll just wait for Leah to jump back on here. And hopefully everybody got a chance to take a look at the minutes. And if we could go ahead and, if there's nobody has anything to add to those, we will go ahead and look for somebody to move to approve those for the November 2021 meeting.
I can move to approve the minutes, and I'm going to go to no video since I've already bumped myself off.
Thanks, Leah.
And I approve whatever the other previous thing was, the agenda.
That's the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I got in. I don't know if I was called either, but I approved the agenda as well. But and I can second the minutes.
All right, great. Well, let's go and vote on the minutes then. Kate, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Emma?
I do.
Do I have to call on Leah again? Do I have to call on the people that set the motion forward?
Yes.
Okay,
I
Leah,
approve.
thank
I
you.
approve.
Mike,
Aye.
great. Lonnie,
Aye.
okay, wonderful. All right, we have approved the minutes and the agenda, and we have Gabe Daly with us. And so I want to welcome him to our meeting. So excited to hear from you. because this is really important for us to learn about climate action. So welcome, Gabe. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I wonder, would it be if it wouldn't take too much time? I know I've met a couple folks
Oh,
as
yeah.
part of this group, but maybe if we could do just a quick run through of introductions, just to say hello. If there's time for that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know me. Should we just go through? I'll just call on people. Kate, would you introduce yourself and say hello?
Hi, I'm Kate Malik. Nice to meet you. I've heard your name and I'm excited to hear from you about everything you're up to. I'm not prepared to say much more, but I'm on the policy committee.
Oh, that's good. Great, thanks, Kate. Emma,
Hi, I'm Emma Andrews. I live in Scottsville and I'm on the education committee.
great, thanks, Emma. Leah,
Hi, I am Leah. I am like a total of blank space and because I have no video. And I live in Crozet and my focus is wildlife corridors.
great, thanks, Leah. And Michael,
Hi, Gabe. Welcome tonight. I'm a member of the, I'm a new member of the committee, also on the education and outreach. I'm an environmental planner and a former councilman from North Carolina. We've lived here a couple of years.
all right, thank you, Mike. And Lonnie,
Yeah, hi, I'm Lonnie Murray. My other hat is I'm a director on this Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District, and I'm on the policy committee, and I live in Whitehall, or Sugar Hollow, as many people know.
all right, great, thank you, everybody. Did I get everybody? Did I miss anyone? All right. I think we got everyone. And we're missing, I think Bruce is going to be joining us, but
I think Bruce said he'd been in meetings all day and had some things he had to do away from the computer, but he's going to try to join us if he can.
yeah, so maybe that'll be a bit later. All right.
Cool. Well, it's so nice to meet all of you. Thanks so much for having me on your meeting tonight, and Kim, thanks for extending the invitation from the committee. Oh, Kim, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to let you know you're welcome, and it's really great to have you here, Gabe. I just want to let you know that your mic is super quiet, so I don't know if there's a way to raise the volume or move it a little closer, if that would be helpful.
I'll at the risk of looking a little funny, I'll hold it closer. It sometimes happens on Zoom calls, and it seems to be completely random when it happens or not. So it might be time for new headphones. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. And you probably know because you asked me to join the call, but I'll just say, so I'm Gabe Daly, the new climate protection program manager for Albemarle County. And that's I'm the first person in that position. And I started with that in May, May of this year, but I've been with the county for a couple of years working on the climate action plan. And that was adopted last, October 2020. So yeah, really excited to be working with the county and also seeing so many different aspects of the county's priorities and work that seem to have synergy and overlap between each other. So the biodiversity action plan and climate action plans being one example of that. So yeah, just excited to be here. And I checked while you were going through the agenda and minutes. It looks like I can share screens. So I made a few slides. I wanted to focus on kind of conversation and not just do like a big presentation, particularly presenting things that you all probably already know. And so I wanted to more have an opportunity just for kind of conversation and discussion, but I did put together just a few slides to kind of at least be conversation starters. So I will see if I can share that and have you be able to see the entire picture rather than the presenter mode once I do that. So let's see. Can you see the full slideshow? Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, here to talk a little bit about synergy between climate protection program for the county, the natural heritage, natural resources program, and basically, I think that the main thing that would love to explore is intersections between the areas that you all are focused on and where I'm focused on in my work. So I wanted to name a few elements of synergy that I saw between the Biodiversity Action Plan and the Climate Action Plan. Actually, when I started with the county, maybe a few months in, someone pointed me to the Biodiversity Plan, and I read it about a year ago and then looked at it again more recently, and so it's exciting to see a lot of the areas of overlap. What I'm going to do for the next few slides, it's going to be a few slides of text, and I'm going to run through them probably quicker than you're able to read, mostly just for the visual effect of kind of showing all the areas of overlap that I saw, and I probably didn't catch all of them, but there's quite a bit. So the numbers on the left, I went through all the goals of the Biodiversity Action Plan. I couldn't find a goal that was numbered 1, and so someone can tell me if I just missed it on the page. But so I listed out, I looked through all the goals, and I thought, where do these connect with the goals or strategies and actions in the Climate Action Plan? And I found a lot of overlap. So on the left is a kind of a short form language of goals from the Biodiversity Action Plan, and then on the right, for the sake of not making the text too tiny, I just listed the numbering that we have in the Climate Action Plan, which happy to share with all of you afterwards. And for folks who might be tuning in to the webinar of this, you can find the Climate Action Plan on our website. There's a quick way to get there, which is albemarle.org/climate. We'll redirect. So we have also actions in the Climate Action Plan around promoting conservation easements, around outreach and education, as well as incentives to the general public, as well as particularly to landowners. We have actions in the plan around best management of county-owned and other public lands in the area, as well as minimizing habitat fragmentation, promoting connectivity. Similarly, with a number of additional kind of focus areas in the biodiversity plan, looking at subdivisions, invasive species, climate change. One thing that I'll mention with climate change that's interesting, to me at least, in the Biodiversity Action Plan, is that the way it's kind of phrased is, or the way the discussion is phrased, is looking at how climate change is likely to impact biodiversity. And so certainly, a lot of the overlap here is between strategies for mitigation, in other words, reducing our impact on or our contribution to global climate change. But the county is also beginning a process to do climate resilience planning. And so that's more preparing our community to hopefully be resilient and stay strong in the face of some of the climate changes that we know are coming, kind of no matter how swiftly the world acts at this point. And that was what I saw somewhat emphasized in the Goal 9 and the kind of general discussion of climate change in the Biodiversity Action Plan, is looking at some of the potentially adverse impacts on biodiversity from climate change. And so there's some synergy there, I think, in terms of our resilience planning that would be great to involve folks from this committee and others who are interested. And then there's a section in the biodiversity plan that I'm sure I don't need to tell all of you, kind of has ecosystem specific goals, and it goes through a number of different types of local ecosystems, large forested areas, xeric habitats, prairie, savanna, et cetera. And I went through just numbering a number of these, of noting areas where we do call out the importance of that in the climate action plan. So the kind of the visual that I wanted to get to there is this is a minimum number. There could be more. These were just the connections that I saw off the bat. Was a lot of overlap. Specifically, at least 14 of 21 of the biodiversity action plan goals are directly linked in terms of language and priority to elements of the climate action plan. And I think where there are areas kind of in the actions that might be not in the center of the Venn diagram, I think there's also opportunities for integrative action, and for where maybe there's a climate action plan that, or excuse me, where there's an action in the CAP that does not necessarily or does not inherently promote biodiversity as well. Maybe there are ways that that action could be moved on, or that goal could be achieved in ways that do promote biodiversity if we're intentional about how we implement the action and how we move towards that goal. So I wanted to share one example, and I'm going to credit Kim for sending me the resource that got me thinking about this. And I can't speak in a in-depth authoritative way to this because I just watched this webinar maybe 2 weeks ago. But I have the source at the bottom, and happy to send the link out to anyone. There was a webinar in April 2020 that was held at the state level, and it was a presentation by a number of folks who work in Virginia, as well as a few folks from other states in the country, to kind of give an outside perspective. And essentially the presentation was about large-scale solar utilities, solar facilities for clean energy generation, and kind of like two different ways that one can go about that. And of course, this might be oversimplified, but on the left image, you can see an example of how sometimes solar facilities are developed. And so you have behind the chain-linked fence, you have what looks to be gravel underneath the solar panels. And other times it's, turf grass or something like that. And so, folks have sometimes kind of raised concerns or wondered, hey, is there like a tension between the climate action goals that certainly would promote more and more use of clean energy and other local environmental, well-being? So thinking about runoff from solar facilities, thinking about potential habitat fragmentation. And this webinar was really interesting because it said that there's not really any reason to go about solar facilities the way it is on the left, which maybe creates this tension and might have some adverse side effects outside of kind of the climate goals. And so there have been a lot of facilities that have been experimenting more and more recently with something like the image on the right, which is actually to have pollinator meadows interspersed throughout the panels. I've also heard of some examples of folks experimenting with different kinds of agricultural production, with particularly plants that food crops that might not need full sun. So there's some really interesting, innovative work being done that caught my attention and made me think about kind of just one example where a solution, a potential climate solution, could be done in a way that is not integrative, or could be done in a way that is integrative. And so that's something that I'm really curious to learn more about, and also see how we can prioritize more of the image on the right in the county to be kind of hitting multiple priorities at once. One other element that I just wanted to share that I thought was interesting and might be interesting to you all is in our recent greenhouse gas emission inventory, which we did for the year 2018, and finished that report in August. I presented it to the Board of Supervisors September 1st, was we did the usual elements of looking at the county's emissions across the kind of common emissions sectors, those being transportation, building energy use, waste, and agricultural and kind of landscape emissions, land use emissions. But we also used a new tool that was provided by ICLEI, which is a nonprofit that supports local governments in doing emission inventories. And this was a new tool to basically look at forest cover across the county and estimate, I should say forest and tree cover across the county, so including areas that are not necessarily large forested tracts, but to estimate carbon sequestration by those forests and trees. And we found that, somewhat to our surprise, that there's actually a lot of carbon sequestration happening in trees and forests across the county. So there's an important takeaway there, which is the critical importance of maintaining forests and tree cover that we have in the county, which I think is also something that's expressed as being important in multiple ways in the Biodiversity Action Plan. One nuance here that is important to share is that we're not, in terms of our inventorying of how we're doing with our emissions and reaching the emission reduction targets that the Climate Action Plan has, we're not going to credit this sequestration that's already happening towards our emission reductions, or kind of in a trade-off there. That would be sort of like, taking credit for something that nature is already doing for us. However, what we would look at and both account for is, if there's continued land use change that removes trees, that would certainly count in turn. We would want to count that as emissions that are occurring. But also if we engage in policies or programs like those that the biodiversity and climate action plans call for, like promoting conservation easements, increasing conservation assistance to landowners, that we would count that. So the more that we are kind of moving in the right direction and protecting some of this forested area, that would be something that through policy, we would say, that can be accounted for. Part of the reason why I wanted to show this map was because it struck me as looking somewhat similar to a map in the Biodiversity Action Plan that also shows forest blocks and tree cover in the county. And the main difference is that the map on the right doesn't distinguish between different types of tree cover or forested areas. One last thing I wanted to share before just kind of opening up to discussion is something that we're working on in the Climate Action Plan right now. And I noticed when rereading, looking through the Biodiversity Action Plan goals and some of the strategies within each goal, is our current Climate Action Plan has 135 actions, I think grouped within 35 strategies that are grouped within kind of the major sectors or areas of action. So the ones I mentioned, transportation, buildings, waste, and landscape. We also have a chapter specifically on utility scale renewable energy. At the moment, the Climate Action Plan, there's a lot of really great actions, but they don't have this element of kind of SMART goals or SMART language to them. So being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, which will be important for the fact that the Climate Action Plan has ultimately quantitative targets to reduce our community greenhouse gas emissions by 45% of 2008 levels by 2030 and to achieve net zero by 2050. So given those quantitative targets, it'll be important for us to refine and update our Climate Action Plan with the kind of SMART goal language. And I, hope it's okay to say, just observing, reading the biodiversity plan, I noticed similarly a lot of really good ideas and elements to move forward on, but also not the kind of the SMART language. And I think that's something, the more that I've looked into it and been working on this for the climate plan, the more I've, I think, come to understand the value of doing this for kind of program monitoring and evaluation, and for hoping, kind of setting ourselves up to really implement the climate action plan well. So that was one element that I thought was interesting and perhaps worth sharing with folks. So that was what I had and wanted to share with you all. I realized that was kind of touching on a few different elements of things in different areas, but hopefully a useful conversation starter. So I'll stop the screen share and see what thoughts, observations, perspectives folks have.
Thank you. Thanks, Gabe. And we've got some hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and call on some folks. Leah, you've got your hand up.
You said Leah, right?
Yes, Leah.
Okay, sorry. My system cut out there for a second. Gabe, you mentioned that you recognize the need to move forward and have more specific strategies, and there'll continue to be discussions and reworkings, I think, of the climate action plan. But what do you see as the ability to implement the different components? How is that going to happen? How do you visualize that or see that?
Great question. So that's part of the work that we're doing right now is basically creating an implementation plan or an implementation program out of the climate action plan. You just mentioned this. Mentioned this, but I will say, I think creating the smart language throughout the plan as much as we can is one way that we'll be able to set ourselves up better for implementation. Taking language that speaks about, let's say, for example, like increasing access to education or resources among the community to, be part of promoting planting native plants, for example. We can sort of start to move in that direction, for example, in a broader way. But I think once we start to get that smart language in there, it will help us be a bit more methodical and strategic in how we move forward with implementation. So along with that, to kind of get to your question that's beyond just the SMART goals, although that I think is the foundation, what we want to build on top of that is a methodology for prioritizing actions within the climate action plan. And so, there are 135 of them. Some of them are ones that can be done more easily than others. And, of course, in an ideal world, we would be able to just move forward with all of them simultaneously, maybe with the exception of some actions that need to come before other actions. But we'd like to kind of create a method for prioritizing the actions given limited resources. And so one of the ways that we're planning to do that is looking at a variety of indicators that would help to kind of elevate some actions as, let's work on these first. So one example might be if there's an action that is kind of a prerequisite for a series of other actions to happen. So maybe like a new policy or something that goes that can be embedded into the comprehensive plan in the upcoming comp plan update process. That might be something that gets elevated because it might open the door to several other actions. A handful of indicators that we also want to look at would be what in the climate action field are sometimes called co-benefits. And you could, of course, look at co-benefits from different vantage points, depending on one's area of focus. From the climate perspective, often co-benefits are grouped into three areas: public health, local natural environmental quality, and kind of local economic vibrancy and health. And so, we'd like to be able to go through and kind of say to some extent, like, is this action in the plan more or less likely to bring some of those additional benefits? Or maybe it's really likely to bring benefits in one area and it's kind of neutral in the other two. So we're hoping to go through and kind of list those out as best as we can for different actions and strategies in the plan to help us, say like, hey, this is an action that is going to bring a lot of other benefits. Two other key indicators, and then I'll stop talking. One is, of course, I should have mentioned this to start, but looking at the potential reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's obviously a key indicator for helping us prioritize the actions in the plan. And then another one is the county. I think the Board of Supervisors added to the county's vision this new value, the community value, that's based on a lot of the work on equity and inclusion that the county's been doing for the last few years. So that's another key indicator that we want to look at in terms of the actions in the plan. Are they, are we going about them in a way that promotes equity and inclusion, access for community members of different backgrounds, different income levels, et cetera. And certainly, not going about actions in a way that increase disparities in the community. So last thing I'll say about that is that some of the indicators, it might be that we can say definitively, oh, this action is likely to have these benefits versus this other action. I think a lot of the actions in the climate plan are a little bit more, the answer for any indicator might be it depends, and it depends on how we go about implementing it. So the solar, increasing solar energy generation is a good example of whether it both improves or maybe has some adverse impacts on local environmental health is totally dependent on how we go about it. Leah, does that kind of get to your question?
It covers a lot of it, yeah. And you've got a lot of plans and ideas and strategies. And I love how you are looking at basically ways to tie your strategies and your goals to other organizations or other plans like the comp plan, things like that. But I have to grin because you use the word we a lot, but I assume you're a group of one. And so is we, the county in general and county staff supporting you, and based on limited resources, what's really the realistic ability to get things done. And like, I love the strategy of tying it to others because that helps reduce that labor cost, right? Or the labor time. But how can you actually get things done? Is it just you, I'm assuming?
Sure. I forgot I was going to say at the beginning when I introduced myself what office and department I work in. So I'm the only person with an official, climate action title in terms of job title. But we spent time earlier this year building out a climate program for the county. And so that in part because the county created a climate action plan, but in some ways didn't have a climate program for it. So I work in the environmental services division, which is inside of the facilities and environmental services department. Myself and several colleagues often partner with Kim in various county initiatives. So although I'm the only person with kind of the official climate title, we are actively and regularly meeting with colleagues across several county departments. We have kind of a core climate program team that includes Kim, that includes a couple other folks from environmental services, someone from the communications office, as well as the equity and inclusion office. And then we also have colleagues who are doing work that moves in the direction of climate action in other offices and divisions in the county. So, transportation planners, land use planners, et cetera. I think that you're right. It is a tall order. There's I don't want to have rose-colored glasses, and I'll just acknowledge that it's definitely going to be a challenge to implement successfully. One of the ways that I've tried to see my role is, my title is program manager. In some ways, it's almost more like a facilitator role, because there's a lot of people across the organization whose jobs have potentially direct impact on county government emissions and community emissions. And so I think part of the work of implementing the CAP successfully is being able to kind of facilitate the right kinds of decision making among staff across the organization to move in that direction.
Great, thank you. And I know I'm taking up time, but let me ask one more thing. So then in terms of the other departments and groups, is Conservation Assistance Program is one of them that is kind of part of the team, or at least would be tied to the CAP?
Yes, and Kim, do you want to say something more about that?
I'm not sure, Leah, do you mean the conservation easement programs?
No, there's actually a conservation assistance program, and I'm going blank on the person's name that I talked with. But anyway, there's Gabe had mentioned conservation assistance as one of the in one of the goals in terms of things that was part of the plan to work with this conservation assistance, like say with maintaining the health of the forest, for example. So then, you know, you could partner with Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District, could partner with Department of Forestry, but there's also a group within the county, and I'm totally going blank, that actually provide some conservation assistance to landowners.
This is Lonnie. I can jump in on that. Actually, it's still the Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District. We manage for the county the Albemarle Conservation Assistance Program. So we do the ag programs, which help fence cattle out of streams, plant cover crops, and do all those great agricultural programs. We also have a set of urban programs. Some of those are done at the statewide, are funded at the state level. But there's limited state money for things like conversion of turf grass to native plants, biofilters, rain gardens, et cetera. But some of that, Albemarle County has generously taken some of its money and helped create the ACAP program, which we're able to use to help fund conservation programs throughout the county, including.
Thank you, Lonnie. It was the ACAP I was trying to think of. Yeah, and I'd forgotten that you guys work with that, because the guy that was doing it left.
Well, you know, we always have, you know, we have staff turnover quite a bit. I won't go into why. A lot of it just has to do with, you know, amount of money we can pay, but we still have staff dedicated to that program. And I'm on the subcommittee of the Conservation District that helps manage that program. So I can answer your questions. But it's a nice lead in, and I had some questions too, sort of along those level. There are, I mean, to state the obvious, I think one of the biggest ways that we can decrease carbon emissions or mitigate carbon emissions is how we manage stormwater and how we manage water quality. If we had a 100-foot buffer on every stream and in the rural area in Albemarle County, that would be a massive reduction in carbon emissions. Also, in urban areas, when you look at the choice between doing a retention basin that's sterile and just like handles water volume, but doesn't really do anything about water quality, versus a biofilter planted with native plants that looks more attractive, is actually capturing carbon and providing pollinator habitat. I think the biofilter is a much better option in terms of that, with a lot more co-benefits. So that's one thing. It's pretty obvious. The other thing is one of the habitats I'm most fascinated with in the county, and the ones our special sites that I've visited, you know, quite a bit, is we have a site in Albemarle County that is a leftover from the last ice age, and this is a paper birch forest. Birches like you might see in the northern part of the United States. And then it also has these little tiny dwarf dogwoods called Cornus canadensis. And as the name might suggest, this is also a plant you might see in Canada. And then also boreal starflower. So this whole habitat is really a habitat of species that have sort of left over from the last ice age. And this is an important habitat to protect. This is the southeastern most occurrence of some of these species in the United States. And so when we talk about climate resiliency, I would hope that we can highlight this ecosystem and how important it is. And we've been working with the Shenandoah National Park System to do things like controlled burns to help protect this ecosystem. And I think by implementing good management practices to help keep these things around, we're helping, you know, I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. The other thing I'd like to mention is when people think about climate change, there's a lot of focus on trees, and we saw that in the graphics that were presented earlier, but grasslands are also very important. And there's been some studies that suggest that native grasslands have maybe even a better potential to store carbon than forests do. And so I think really making sure that we don't focus exclusively on trees and we take into account native grasslands and the importance of our native grasslands to conservation. They also have benefits in terms of biodiversity and supporting species like bobwhite quail. But those roots, if you look at the diagrams of roots of our native plants and grasses, their roots are like vastly different than turf grasses. And there's just a lot of research out there. And then also about, and I hope you're in conversations with our district manager about soil health and the co-benefits there. So that's what I got.
Thanks, Lonnie. I really appreciate all of those points, and I don't think there's not much for me to add, except I'll say if there are like particular resources that you think would be good for me to take a look at in terms of, you know, just kind of reading up on, I'd be very interested. You know, some of the elements of what you've said, broadly speaking, I'm familiar with. And, you know, my background is kind of in a sort of like program facilitation type background. And so I'm not coming with like a scientific or conservation expertise background. So if there are resources that, you know, you think would be good for me to kind of dig into, I love learning the details of things that I'm not yet familiar with. So yeah, all of those points are super interesting. And some of them I kind of like had heard a bit, but yeah, if there's readings that you think would be good for me to just kind of have in the back of my mind going forward, I'd be really interested, and maybe we can also find a time to speak more in depth. So thanks for naming those. And I have seen the graphic, and I don't know if you know Rep. Glietly.
Oh yeah.
One of my colleagues in environmental services in the county, big, really into native plants. He's shown me some of those graphics of like the depth of roots of you know, turf grass compared to a dozen or so different types of native plants.
Well, I mean, some of the things, I think there are some concrete policies that could come out of this. First, in terms of biodiversity conservation and climate resilience, it's important that the county continue to have a proactive dialogue with the Shenandoah National Park System until our committee reached out to their biologists. They hadn't done a controlled burn in that area with the paper birch forest in a long time. And we were very close to losing those species. And there's some great graphs that show that. So, you know, having an open dialogue with the Shenandoah National Park System about these resources that are important to us, I think is very important. Some of the things in terms of making sure that our policies, in terms of working with Kim and her stream health initiative in terms of stream buffers, I think that's something that's absolutely got to be in there. The other thing, some things that have implications in climate change that people don't really think about, just how you manage pasture. You can be the difference between, you can have the same number of cows on the same number of acres, but if you rotationally graze those animals, you can change that from being something that contributes carbon to something that sequesters carbon. And a lot of people aren't aware that the impact of rotational grazing. So for example, the county supporting rotational grazing, that's another important factor in climate change. And then of course, in terms of like our development practices, supporting low impact development and supporting, and I'm sure Rep could talk about this, the importance of biofilters versus like big retention basins, or like mechanical means of dealing with stormwater versus biological means of dealing with stormwater. So, but yes, if there's any resources like that, and then I hope you've met our district manager, Ann Coates. If you haven't, I encourage you to have an open dialogue with her and form a relationship there.
We did. We've had a couple conversations so far, and are probably due for another one.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that input, Lonnie. And Emma, I'm going to go ahead and call on you.
Okay, this will be really quick. I just wanted to thank you, Gabe, for your presentation and introducing us to the work that you're doing. Um, I think I can speak for all of us, the natural heritage. When we can have this open dialogue to implement biodiversity. Did my Wi-Fi cut out? To implement biodiversity in all the programs that you're doing. And I just had a clarifying question for you. So are you supporting programs that are like currently or those to happen, or are you creating programs?
I think it got a little choppy, Emma.
Oh.
I think I got the crux of your question, which was, am I more in a role of
Okay.
creating programs or supporting existing programs? Was
Yeah,
that right?
that's my question.
Yeah, well, probably both. And so, yeah, I would say it's a both and. I would say that in terms of supporting existing programs, so when I came on board with the county, essentially I started out in the Office of Equity and Inclusion to bring an equity lens to the climate action plan, and then I was there for a couple months and then moved over to work directly on the plan. So most of my work in the first kind of 12 to 18 months was working on the draft climate action plan, and then in this new position, essentially taking on the kind of the portfolio of implementing the climate action plan and also getting us going with a resilience planning process. So that's kind of my main focus. And then within that, I think you're right. There are both opportunities to create new programs or also like new policies that can help help kind of drive or help incentivize directions that we can go in, and supporting and enhancing existing programs. I think the only further thing I would say is that my role in terms of supporting existing programs is probably more supporting the staff who are already working on those. So when I came on, it's like the climate program is my main focus, and to the extent that there are programs that intersect with climate action, there's already other staff who are often working on those. And so, I see my role as helping to elevate that work, or helping that work to become more kind of generative and positive in terms of our climate goals. Or maybe if there's additional resources that we can find to like scale up programs that are beneficial. And then certainly, yeah, creating new programs is maybe more where I will have a direct role in kind of program development or implementation.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Emma. And Kate.
Just really quickly, thanks for all that great information. I'm really glad that you're in this position doing this work. You've touched on, I think, little pieces of this, but are there mechanisms whereby yourself or other folks you work with have an input role, or not quite an oversight role, but an input role to current purchasing and things that are happening versus new programming? Like, I can totally see how a new program being created could take input from the climate office and make better choices. But are there mechanisms to go backwards and to handle things that are in place, or practices or purchases and things that, like, are you guys being consulted? Because you have so much experience and you've been in this plan for so long. It seems like you'd have really great input for those types of things also.
That's a really great point. So two pieces to the answer. One is that we are in process of essentially updating and improving the county's procedures and policies around sustainable operations. And so that work is focused on local government operations. So kind of our own house and wanting to lead by example. And one of my colleagues in environmental services who also worked extensively on the climate action plan, including before I came on board with the county, is leading up that effort. I've been part of it as a stakeholder, but yeah, basically working to take what are at this point years old, maybe even a couple of like decade or so old policies around like energy savings and different forms of conservation, and updating those and making them more robust. So we've had meetings with county leadership and senior staff to talk about the process by which we're going to go about this across different areas. You know, looking at the county's buildings, you know, like building operations, looking at, I think you mentioned, I heard you say purchasing, so looking at kind of like procurement, looking at county lands and how we manage, you know, lands that we own. So yeah, there's an effort that's underway there to help improve those policies and help educate staff in kind of the procedures that those updated policies would then would mandate. So that's kind of one piece, which is our own in-house work, and that is driven by broad priorities of the county, but also there are, if you look in the climate action plan, each section or chapter has actions in it that refer specifically to like local government policy and operations. So you know, that's a major driver for that work going on. The second part of the answer is, you know, we also recognize that the kind of the community-wide goals of the plan are really going to require a whole of government approach and whole of government being on board for that, because like we talked about earlier, you know, I'm not directly working on all the different things that that the county works on in terms of planning and programs, et cetera. So the other way that we're trying to go about that is we've had some meetings with senior leadership with the county just to kind of broach the topic of climate action with them, and talk a little bit more about, you know, the importance of the whole of government approach, and then to begin meeting with, you know, senior staff within different departments, and have that conversation. One of the kind of midpoint culminations of that effort is going to be creating what we're loosely referring to right now as like a climate lens, that we could train staff in to be able to kind of bring a climate perspective to their decision making on, you know, different policies and programs.
That's fabulous. Thank you, because I think that's really the only solution, is to make sure that, in the same way, I think of it as equity and inclusion needs to be throughout our entire framework. Climate solutions have to be the same. Both of those have to simply interlace into everything if we're going to get where we need to go. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you, Kate. Is there anyone else that has a question? If not, I actually, Gabe, I wanted to ask you, one of the things you talked about is the importance of that we have some control over the county operations and county lands. And if there's something that you in particular are excited about that is moving forward right now, or that is in the works. I mean, know that we've already had conversations about mowing and sort of the management of not only our parks, but also our school land.
That's a great question, Christine. In terms of county managed land specifically, the folks who I've spoken with in the Parks and Rec department are very excited and on board about you know, kind of continuing to refine or update or modify practices to help support the climate action plan, and so right, looking at areas where grass does not need to be mowed, for example, as kind of a starting point. Also looking at ways in which you know, we can encourage more native plant landscapes And so that's something that that's actually one of the stakeholder groups is folks who work on county owned lands and parks in terms of the sustainable kind of operations policies and procedures. So that's like one kind of bucket area of work that we're moving, wanting to move forward with and consult with stakeholders in the organization to be able to make improvements with how we manage our own lands. So that's one element that I'm quite excited by. And there's also some elements that are outside that specifically. One that's kind of not tangentially, but like connected in sort of a tangent is or touching is some really great initiatives around that different nonprofit organizations have been up to working with schools. And I've been in touch with a number of folks who've done really great kind of educational programming with the schools around environmental education, land management, and a variety of other related topics. So looking to see how we can kind of support and promote that kind of work that might not necessarily have like a direct one-to-one change or benefit this year, but that is hopefully an investment long-term in folks who are growing up in the county. We've also done, this is outside the specific domain of your question, but I think one activity that I'm also really excited by that kind of connects the pieces of what Kate said at the end of climate action and equity is work that the county has of other nonprofits doing projects to help electrify appliances and also weatherization in lower income households. And that's work that the county continues to plan to support. So not landscape related, but also some important work.
If I could add, so for example, are there the metrics that to be able to measure the changes in terms of, like, do we know right now how much CO2 is being emitted? Let's just take mowing, for instance. Has there been an inventory taken, for example, where we know the number of mowing hours and how much gas is burned in those mowing hours so that we can, the community can actually look those numbers and say at the end of 1 year, year 1, year 2, that there is actually a really tangible change over time?
That's a great point. That's something that we would need to add to our greenhouse gas inventory. So those metrics are not currently in our inventory, but I think something that we could add and certainly should if we can.
Well, I think you'd also increase that too if you were able to convert some of those areas with fescue into warm season native grasses. That is an additional boost on that, in terms of, we know that sequesters way more carbon in the soil. One of the things that perplexes me is that we have a large number of citizens in Albemarle County that apply for the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, but we don't really get any applications from Albemarle County. And Albemarle County as an agency is also able to apply for programs for conservation assistance. And I keep expecting that someday we'll get an application from county parks, for example, for something that manages stormwater or replaces turf grass with native plants. And I still haven't seen any of those come in front of me. So it seems like money the county could be using right now. And I'm perplexed why I haven't seen those applications.
Lonnie, now that you've just said that, I think that there's an opportunity. I'm going to meet with Jim Barber soon, so I'm going to suggest that. Maybe for Darden Tau.
Great. And just so you know, in terms of ranking, things that address stormwater have a higher ranking, but things also visible by the public have a higher ranking. So I think, having a conversation with some of our staff about in areas that might have the most benefit is also a way to do this. Is we do offer technical assistance. So using our staff for that free technical assistance to try and choose the right places that would have the most benefit.
Yeah, thank you. Kim, just not to put you on the spot, but is there anything particular that you would want to say in response to Lonnie's kind of question comment?
I don't know. It's something that I'm kind of curious about it. There could be a conflict of interest because the county is providing funds to that program. And I'm sure that those funds are intended for landowners to use.
No, they're not.
Not for
restricted.
the county to use by itself. Excuse me, I will just finish speaking first.
Okay.
And so I mean, I would feel uncomfortable with that, but it might be there is no policy, and so it could happen. I did want to mention another thing though, related to the reduced mowing that Christine was mentioning, which is that Rep and I have actually talked about not just mowing hours, but like mapping through GIS all of the county properties and identifying areas that could have reduced mowing. And so that might be another way to, measure reductions in emissions and capture that metric.
Kim, just for clarification, there's two programs. Albemarle County provides money for the ACAP, the Albemarle Conservation Assistance Program. We also have money from the state called the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program that comes from the state. And so Albemarle County can apply for the state money.
Yes, I'm aware of that. But the thing is that the money from Albemarle is used after the money from VCAP is used up. So we would still be taking it away from landowners that could potentially be using it. So I mean, we can have a conversation about it offline if you'd like, but I see a conflict there. And so it would just be something I would want to look into before you say authoritatively that that's something that the county should do. I'm not confident in that to make that statement right now.
Okay.
I wanted to ask one question of Gabe. Thanks for your presentation. I'm a little confused, and maybe this is not the place to explain it, but where your purview goes and how much you know about what's going on in the county land. But I would suggest that shading, if we're thinking about climate, shade and canopy cover would be a priority, I would think, as far as climate, especially since much of the county some of the county land is in urban areas or urbanized areas. As much as we can counter the heat island effect and increase, I would think is sort of a macro look at cooling. From what I understand from the literature, it's shading and canopy would be prioritized. Then I think, of course, replacing lawn with meadow and things like that also, which would, Christine, it'd be good to follow up about Dardental. But is there any, to get to is there any basic list of what you're actually talking about on county lands? There's a list that we could comment on. Is there a simple list of focus or initiatives? You listed a number of things, but are they written down anywhere where we can review that?
Yeah, totally. So, and great point about the shading and particularly like urban canopy cover. So in terms of resources, I'll hold up my hard copy just for the camera, but much of what I was saying was drawing from the climate action plan, and I can.
Which is on the web, right?
It is on the web, and actually the I believe as long as the kind of shortcut link should still be active is if you just do albemarle.org, the county's website, / the word climate. So albemarle.org/climate, it'll redirect you to our climate program page where you can download. Most of what I was drawing on in kind of the early part when I had the slides up was from the landscape, natural resources, and agriculture chapter or section. So definitely take a look at that. That's where you'll kind of see a list of the actions that are in the plan. And then just to your specific point, that it's a really great one, and I think probably the reason why we do have an action in the plan around canopy cover. It's also something that we're going to be looking at in our resilience planning work. That is right now the county's been working with a consultant to do kind of like a bird's eye view, big data vulnerability assessment,
That's
looking
what
at,
I was asking about, is really more
Yeah.
specific. Is there something specific as opposed to a goal, but is it something specific yet?
yeah, well, so first off, definitely take a look at the plan, and then second, the what you're talking about with, shade and cooling and urban heat islands is definitely part of our consideration
Right.
with the upcoming resilience planning work.
Yeah, and I guess that as far as specifics, also purchasing, if that is something beyond a goal, but it's a list. But yeah, anyway, all that sounds great.
Yeah, I think partially, and I don't know if you were on the call for this point, but I think that's where what I said a little earlier around updating and refining our climate action plan with smart language, so kind of, or SMART goals, specific, measurable, time bound, et cetera, is something that we haven't yet done, but is crucial work.
Mhm. Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to see the examples of those that SMART goal language. And, when that's available, it'll really be interesting to see how that's laid out. Um, but are there any other questions or comments that anybody else wants to make before we let Gabe go?
I'll just, one other thing I'll add in there is that if they have an opportunity for, some localities have gotten satellite data to do land cover analysis. I know the county periodically does land cover analysis. One thing I've wondered for a long time is that typically they do a poor job of characterizing grasslands in the land cover analysis. They just lump them all together as one, as if they're all the same. And if the next time we do land cover analysis, we can make an effort to identify native warm season grasslands and separate them out from turf grasses, for example, that would be really huge. Right now, we don't have a good idea of where they occur and how many are left and what we need to do to conserve them.
I thank you, Lonnie. And I actually have one more thing to ask, and that is, what can this group, the Natural Heritage Committee, do to help support your work and to help move those goals forward that are in the climate action plan?
Great question to close on.
Yeah.
Two elements come to mind. I'm sure there are more, but the two items that are top of mind is one, I definitely see this group as a key group of stakeholders and kind of collectively key stakeholder resource in terms of our, moving from the kind of high level plan into actually implementation and getting into the weeds. Perhaps maybe a good pun here. Really kind of getting into the details of implementation. So you all are folks that it would be great to connect with, as expert stakeholders to kind of bring ideas to the table to, give feedback on areas where the county wants to move forward, where, to kind of help sharpen some of our programming. So that's one kind of that sort of resource. And the second one, escaped my mind for a moment. So the second one is, I would love to, I gave you my kind of in 20 minutes, my first hit of where I saw intersections and overlap between the biodiversity action plan, for example, and the climate action plan. But that was just like my kind of initial take. And so one thing that I think would be really helpful would be to look in more detail and work with you all on really getting a clearer sense of where there are mutually beneficial actions or kind of strategies within each plan. And also looking at how, where there might be actions in the climate action plan that, like I said a little bit ago, for some of the other co-benefits or other indicators of prioritization, where right now, as the action is phrased, giving us direction, the answer for some of the co-benefits is it depends, meaning it depends on how the county goes about implementing that action, could bring a lot of other co-benefits, or could maybe have some unintended consequences that we would like to avoid, if at all possible. I would love to have some thought partners in terms of, really thinking through how we can implement actions in a way that brings the most co-benefits and is, not just kind of being like overly focused or kind of blinders on and thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, but is thinking about holistically about doing that in a way that promotes, the well-being of our local environment and community.
And the best way to get those to you, we can work with Kim and make sure, because some of those ideas were brought up here today in this meeting. But that's a great invitation for us, right? To continue to be thinking about them and how we can get those thoughts to you. So I appreciate that invitation. And
yeah, Christine, I guess just right. So in terms of like getting those, I think there will be a couple of avenues. One is certainly if just in terms of like background kind of reading educational material, like some of what Lonnie mentioned earlier, please feel free, Christine, you can share my email with folks who are on the committee. Please feel free to, contact me, and if there are resources that you think would be good for me to look at, I'm happy to do. So that's one. And second one would be kind of once we've set up this framework for doing the SMART goals and prioritization work, then as we start looking at like particular projects and programs, it would be great to actually kind of connect and put our heads together on different elements. So both I'm open to input from you all, as it comes up, as it comes to mind. And I think there will be key points in our process where inviting your feedback will be helpful.
I'd love to see the county, when the Dogwood Festival rolls around, for the county do a promotional thing about our native Cornus canadensis and its threats faced by climate change. I'd love to see that.
good suggestion, Lonnie. I wanted, before you leave, Gabe, Rod Walker, I believe, has a comment or question. And so if we could hear from him, that'd be great. He's got his hand up.
Nicole, are you able to bring him over? She's monitoring 2 meetings, so she might not be able to do it.
Who would you like moved over?
Rod and Maggie Walker.
Are we allowing them to speak to public comment, or are we putting them in a panelist position?
You can bring them in as a panelist.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rod, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. Hey, Gabe, thank you very much. I just wanted to chime in. I heard the comments early on with regard to the importance of forest cover. I heard the comments more recently about shade and such things. And it won't surprise too many people on here to hear me put a plug in for the fact that we have a lot of vines, invasive vines out there taking down forest canopy all over the county. And it's certainly all you have to do is drive around Charlottesville and look at the kudzu and the porcelain berry, the ivy and everything else, which are taking down the trees. And what you see in the city is peanuts compared to what's happening out in the rest of the county. And so if you're really serious about this, I would submit that you need to figure out some kind of effort to go deal with this problem, or we're going to be losing carbon sequestration on a significant scale, more and more as time goes on. And if you'd like to have a conversation, I'd be happy to chime in if you want to chat and talk about how we might work together to do that. Because I'm both a landowner and I wear the Blue Ridge Prism hat at the same time. So happy to talk with you about how this might be dealt with on a county-wide basis if you're interested.
Thank you, Rod. Didn't the Virginia legislature authorize localities to control English ivy? Or am I just imagining that?
The answer is, if they have, I don't know about it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. And we have various initiatives going into the new legislature, but with the change of guard in Richmond, I don't have a lot of confidence that a whole lot's going to happen.
Thanks, Rod, for bringing up that point and that suggestion. Yeah, I'm totally open to conversation and further discussion about that. One thing for folks who might be tuning in to the webinar to note, that we also have I think you can find this on the climate page that I've mentioned a few times, but there's also an email that gets forwarded to me and one of my colleagues that's climate@albemarle.org. So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out, and thanks for bringing that up.
You got it. Thank you.
You're muted, Christine.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Rod. And Rod, I hope you will stay on, because we're going to be talking about the spotted lanternfly in just a minute. But thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Gabe. You have spent quite a bit of time, and we are really excited to see all those intersections, because I think together, we're looking forward to some progress in all these realms. And so the more that things overlap, the more likely we're going to have some movement on them. So it was really great to hear from you, and thanks for listening to us. And we look forward to, that continued partnership.
Yeah, thank you all. Really great to see some of you again, meet some of you for the first time. I appreciate the conversation and look forward to more.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe.
We'll let you go on to spend the rest of the evening with your family now.
I have to get some dinner.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
All right.
Take care.
Have a good night. All right, great. Oh, that was really great quest. Thank you, everybody, for your great questions as well. All right, so we're going to move on to our follow-ups. And the first thing on the list is important sites, updates, and outreach. And this is a great time for anybody who has had an opportunity to visit any important sites, or if you have anything that you would like to share about an important site in Albemarle County. And I know, Lonnie, you did a little bit. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I've mentioned this before, that you can examine the. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that the records of what species have been found in Albemarle County, you can get the herbarium specimens of those and search for them. So my wife and I have been going through there and looking for occurrences of rare species in Albemarle County and tracking them down. And we found some very interesting things. There's an occurrence of Canadian plum, for example, in Albemarle County. And so we've been trying to track down some of those occurrences and re-verify them to make sure that those species are still there. And at some point, I think it'd be helpful to have a mapping effort to plug those in somewhere.
Oh, that's nice. And we look forward to you sharing that with us. Yeah, that's really cool. Anybody else have any thing that they would like to report?
Something briefly, where I live, it's not yet an important site, but I hope it will be soon, one day. And I just wanted to report that we have someone coming out to with the James River Buffer Program to put trees in the first week of January. So that will hopefully be a nice step to improving the area that I'm on.
Oh, that's great, Emma. Great to hear that. All right, we're going to move on to the spotted lanternfly update. And really excited. I hope everybody got a chance to see the article in the Seaville, which is great. And it was just interesting also to have it in the middle in the winter. So hopefully it'll stay on people's minds, or we can get a follow-up on that. But thank you, Rod, and Kim for your input with that. And so that was great. I'm trying to think, help me out. As Rod, we'd love to hear from you if you have anything that you wanted to add. If you've heard anything back from the mailers that you sent out. Did one arrive at your house?
So you're going to love it. So of course I turned in 450 flyers on the 22nd of October. Today I called the 800 number for the U.S. Postal Service and created a service request for them to go figure out what happened to them, because they went nowhere.
Oh.
They were never delivered.
Oh my.
And that was what, 5-6 weeks ago now?
Where were they from?
So I dropped them off across the counter at the Crozet post office. They took them, they have them, they know they have them.
Pulled up to this edge of the.
But yeah, who knows? I will be following up. They tell me I should hear in a few days.
Oh my.
We're still having big problems with the post office in Albemarle County. I mean, I had taxes that my wife and I filed, and it took maybe 9 months for the IRS to actually receive our taxes.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, it's a disaster.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, it's all a learning experience thinking about how using the mail, right?
Well, and in the case of these flyers, of course, as you pointed out, now that we're getting into the winter, they're not quite irrelevant, but they're not nearly as important as if they'd come out 2 months ago. So it's a lesson to be learned for if we do more of this next year, how we plan ahead, well ahead to get anything done.
Well, maybe there will be a delay into the spring.
That's right, quite possibly.
We can keep our fingers crossed for that one.
You can tell me.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and listen to him.
Well, thank you, Rod. Is there anything else? Michael, is there anything else we want to add?
I was only going to suggest that, Rod, I think it's important that you keep our senators up to date as to what's going on, because they've really been paying a lot of attention to the mail problem here, but I don't know that they understand the aspect of what we're facing as a county committee trying to help alleviate or help stop an invasive species coming into the county. I mean, that's an aspect of the mail delays that I doubt that they really have a good grip on. So I know you're can be very outspoken. You have a lot of interesting and factual information to relay. That may be something that you can help educate Senator Warner on, that he just doesn't know about.
Good point. Thank you.
And Christine, I can't think of another thing other than what we're currently doing. Can you clarify for me, please, the newsletter article we talked about the last meeting? What newsletter are we
I think
related that to.
I think the idea was just of creating a blurb that we could send out to HOAs and say, is this something that you could include in your newsletter that you put out? And,
Okay.
something that could come out in the spring when we're seeing the nymphs just hatching out, at some key points.
Okay,
And
that,
maybe,
that helps. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
all right. Well, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to,
Christine. Oh,
oh, I'm sorry, am I missing a hand?
oh, it's okay. I just wanted to mention quickly that because we had this discussion at our last meeting and we're unsure about additional sightings. So before the interview with the Seville, I talked with Carrie Swanson and she was also interviewed, but she confirmed for me that the only other sighting was one individual adult in Belmont that was found on the sidewalk. And they did a lot of monitoring around the area, didn't find anything else. So it's not, an outbreak location, but was just a single individual. And there's none of the other reports were confirmed. So I just wanted to share that with the group because we had the question last month about it.
Great, thank you. And I think that all those groups like the Master Gardeners, I don't know if the Master Naturalists were also doing it, but the monitoring that hopefully will continue to happen into next year. And as more people become informed, hopefully we'll get more monitors out there as well. Yeah, thanks, Kim. So the next thing on our agenda is the important site designation criteria, and we could hold off on that, and if that can be a part of the policy group's report, because I know you guys did talk about that. Would that be okay to hold off? Okay, great. And then also I just want to talk about the comprehensive plan update, and Tom Olivier has been really great about communicating about what is happening. And I was not able to make the November 9th Seville 100 meeting. I don't know if anybody anybody else on the committee was able to do that, but he did report back that on the November 3rd Board of Supervisor meetings that that they're going to be, they looked at the criteria, there's going to be a citizen working group, and this group is going to have 8 to 15 members that represent different demographics, spatial and socioeconomic subset of the county population. And it's going to serve as a representative sounding board for policy proposals and links to the community for engagement efforts. And I'm just actually reading right off of Tom's email that he sent out. And I guess there is a concern with this, the working group. Will these members of this group have the expertise that we would hope in certain areas? And so I believe in December that they are going to be, the board is going to be looking at the selection process for the working group. But I just want to encourage us to be thinking as a group collectively, what sort of visions, things that we want to make sure remain in the comprehensive plan, the language that we want to see remain in there. Are there any additions to the comprehensive plan? So I don't know if the best way, I think we discussed this last month, perhaps for me to create a Google Doc. And so as these ideas come forward that we're thinking, we're going to just jot it down in that Google Doc so that we're capturing sort of in visions of what we hope will either remain or that we can add in this comprehensive plan update.
Yeah, I think one of the big things to keep an eye on is every time this happens, there's a movement by a certain subset of the population to expand the growth area or to increase density in the rural area. And So I think that's a big thing that we need to keep our eyes open for.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll make sure that I continue to update, and I'm going to try to stay involved on that level. I know that Leah's also on Tom's email list, and I don't know if there's anybody else who's interested in getting those emails from Tom, but I'd be happy to connect you. The next thing that is on the list here on the agenda is just looking at membership. I'm excited to, Kenan and I just communicated over email today, and Kenan hopefully is going to reapply, and so that he can be reappointed to the committee. And so that leaves us with two vacancies. And I did, in my email to the Friends of the NHC, I did let them know that we do have these two vacancies. And so I think that we should take full advantage of the fact that we can have 12 members on the committee. And so I hope that everybody will be thinking about who would make a nice addition to fill up our committee membership. Or if you have any suggestions of somebody you think that would be a good member, and I'd be happy to reach out to that person. So please let me know. And then we'll move on to staff update from Kim. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Christine. So I don't have too many things on my list tonight. Obviously, the biggest thing I've been working on is the Stream Health project that was presented to the board yesterday, the 14 final proposals. I did want to share really quick, and I'll share this with Gabe because I think he's seen, but let's see if I can find it and then I can keep talking. There we go. Just on the topic of alignment with other plans, are you all seeing the graphic?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have two screens, so I don't always know which screen you're looking at. So I just wanted to show, the graphic that we created shows this degree of alignment with, if you scroll down, the blue is comprehensive plan, yellow is the climate action plan, and green is the biodiversity action plan. So that was just really interesting and related to what Gabe was talking about with alignment. And then in each of the proposals, we've included, so this is just what the proposal looks like, if for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at them yet. On the sidebar, all of the references to these different plan goals and strategies that align with that particular Stream Health proposal. And so that also relates to what Gabe was talking about, this relationship between the climate action plan and the biodiversity action plan. And meant to go with that packet of final proposals was this alignment table so that you could quickly reference what those numbers mean. And so unfortunately that was left out of the packet that went to the board, but it was shared with them, and it's also on our public input site. So if you are looking for, how the biodiversity action plan, the climate action plan, and if it's of interest to you, the Stream Health project, are all interrelated, this is kind of an just a resource that I put together that might be useful to you. And so I just wanted to share that. And let's see, I saw that the policy committee talked about the Stream Health project and read those proposals. So I thank you for that and for providing feedback. I would love to have a discussion about that. I'm not sure we're going to have time tonight, but there's a lot of inaccuracies and contradictions in the minutes. And so it would be great if we could, work through some of that. So that if this committee does provide something to the board, it can, we can make sure that it's based in fact. And so then, the last thing I just wanted to mention is that I'll be talking tomorrow to the Virginia Safe Wildlife Corridors Collaborative. about the wildlife project on Route 29. So I'm just going to share what we've been up to there and progress that's been made. The citizen scientists from Virginia Master Naturalists have been doing an amazing job, and there's some links to the project now on the VSWCC website as well. So hopefully I'll get some feedback from the Research and Resources Committee and direction if they have any suggestions of how to move forward with the project. So I think that is all. Oh, I have one more thing, which is that actually Gabe, for the climate action plan, worked with other staff to create this amazing database to monitor and track progress on each of the CAP strategies and actions. And it's a really amazing resource for the climate action plan. And I've worked with those staff, and I'm going to be meeting with them next week to develop something really similar for the biodiversity action plan, because we've had the work plan, and I created the that Word document to try to track what progress has been made, but it's not a very efficient way to keep track of what we're doing and how progress is being made. And so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to use that framework that is already created for the climate action plan and just tweak it slightly, because they are very similar in their structure, and that will be a resource for us tracking progress on those goals and recommendations moving forward.
Yeah, that is really exciting, Kim, and I'm super excited to see that, because it does make a difference if you can actually really track your progress and know that you're getting somewhere. And if the document that you showed us, we can find that on the Stream Health Initiative, it's in there, right?
The alignment table, yes, yeah. I immediately put it when we realized it was left off the board packet. It's on the public input site. It's in the right-hand sidebar, but I can also email it to this group if that's useful.
All right. Yeah, really great resources. And yeah, and I just want to say to the group, I was able to tune in to the presentation. I thought it was just really well done. I thought there were good questions that were asked, and I'm just really appreciative of Kim's work and Laurel, and also that we have such a supportive board of supervisors. I thought that they were very supportive of the proposals, and I thought we're really lucky to live in a place where we have that support. So great, thank you. We are going to move on to let me get my agenda up here. All right, our working groups. And so education and outreach. Well, I just want to apologize to my group for not actually getting a meeting together for us. And I think that hopefully we can get together in January, and we'll do that with the help of Carolyn. But I do want to report, and maybe if you don't mind, Mike, I would love you to perhaps talk about the project that we are working on with the Albemarle County Historical Society and the Piedmont Master Gardeners, because you really you've been the driving force behind that.
Well, thank you. I know Sterling Howell was on earlier, and I don't think he's on right now, and Tom Chapman may have been on when we started. I also do some volunteer work for the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. And if you've been to their building, to the McIntyre building, which houses a library as well as a historical society, you may or may not know about the garden area that is behind the building, and it's been there for quite a while. It's also the home of one of our most historic white ash trees in the county. Been there a long time, almost, from what I understand, maybe over 100 years. Been identified by the naturalists with a special plaque and so forth. But in the sense of wanting to increase the biodiversity of the community, the city, the county, just the region, my attitude is, instead of trying to bite, the whole elephant, let's bite part of the elephant one at a time. So here's this great opportunity to partner And that's the approach we're taking. This is a partnership between the committee that we're pursuing, the Piedmont Master Gardeners and the Historical Society, to upgrade and improve the site itself where we can, with some addition of herbaceous plants, some tree pruning, some addition of some grasses around a kiosk, initiative that will involve approaching a couple of schools, the Renaissance School, the Village School. Christine may have a comment more about that as we go along. But just in general, take advantage of the site that's available. See if we can partner with a couple of organizations and work together to accomplish some of our overall goals. So that's really the initiative we've been working on. We had an initial meeting a couple of weeks ago where we got to sit outside in the garden and kind of enjoy the weather and talk about what we might try to accomplish together. We've just had a Zoom earlier today to review a proposed letter that Christine, as representative for the committee, and I think probably Bill Sublett, who's the incoming president for the Piedmont Master Gardeners, to offer about 5 different ideas to the Historical Society for how we might work together to upgrade this site and try to accomplish some common goals that we all have. Again, it might include upgrading a kiosk area that's at the front of the building, adding more to a couple of planting areas and planting border, trying to protect the white ash that's there. This is an area that can be overused by homeless that are downtown, and we want to be sensitive to that. At the same time, protect the environmental aspects of the garden itself. And really make an effort with, from an educational standpoint, to involve local students. Piedmont Master Gardeners is going to pursue a grant with the Ravenna Garden Club, and we're hoping that Tom will embrace these ideas that are being put forward and possibly have an opportunity for some other grant inquiries that from a historical standpoint or historical landscape standpoint that we might be work together on to get some additional funds. Piedmont Master Gardeners proposing to match some of the grant money. If we can achieve some grants, then we'll have some additional funds to work with. So that's kind of an overview of kind of where we're going. Hopefully Tom gets the letter we've put together within the next 24, 48 hours. And hopefully we get a response back within the next week or so and have some general idea of moving forward here before the end of the year. That's where we are.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for all of your efforts to really make this happen. And I'm excited because there's a really large kiosk that is in front of the Historical Society that has nothing on it right now. And I talked to a teacher at the Village School, and really she's excited about partnering and maybe having the students create some nice informational signage about the native plants and how they might have been used by the indigenous people. So this idea of, as much as we can, to get people exposed to these wild landscapes and understanding the value and importance of them. So anyhow, and I just want to say, Emma, we also toured the main library, and there's some tiny little spaces that I think we can make some additions of some native plants. But I think there are probably some other opportunities to pursue down the line of having these little demonstration gardens. And the more that we can have, the more exposure that we'll have in the community.
Yeah, this is really an initiative that has a longer term goal of partnering with other organizations. You know, we've talked about partnering with the library system because of the number of different libraries throughout the county. And Tom Chapman has indicated that as supportive he's very supportive of this and actually become an advocate for us with the library director and others that will have to make some decisions long-term about that. So we see this as a potentially a long-term project.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Mike. And I just want to invite any of our other working group members, if they have anything they want to add on the education and outreach front. And apologize to you guys for not being a better leader and getting us together, but the new year is right around the corner. All right, maybe we will move on to wildlife corridors and Leah.
Okay, hi. I'm glad to hear that Kim's going to be doing an update tomorrow at the research committee, subcommittee of the Virginia Safe Wildlife Corridors Collaborative. I had seen that come in, so yay. And wanted to let you all know that we should know about the funding from the Dave Matthews Band Foundation next week for the Bobcat Project. And also in the meantime, a person who's I guess sort of got a grant maybe with the Smithsonian Institution. She's approached those of us that have been working on the Bobcat Project to incorporate information from it as information unfolds once we get the project running, to incorporate information and even use some of our planning information in developing a class for middle school students at the community lab school in Charlottesville. The woman has been tasked with a mission, I guess, of developing coursework for public schools that would tie space technology with conservation science. And when I first heard this, I was like, huh? And then I was like, oh yeah, GPS, the satellite data, and using that technology. It is a way of, or one way to consider it is as space technology. So she's really excited by the work that the few of us have been doing on the Bobcat Project. And she's actually wanting to develop the curriculum right now and has already gotten approval from the school to create a class that would be presented third quarter this coming year. So we'll see. I'm like kind of a little ahead of the game because it would be helpful to have data first, but you know, we can always punt with it. We'll make it work.
That is really cool, Leah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how many things are coming out of this, you know, how many opportunities, and it's just wonderful. So let's hope we get the funding.
We'll all keep our fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Leah. All right. I know we don't have much time left, but we're handing it over to the policy committee. Policy group.
Okay. Yeah, hi, this is Lonnie. I'll try to be as quick as I can. So one of the first things we talked about was special sites. So we're going to be we're going to be putting together a list of questions of factors that we consider to be important for special sites. And then what we're going to do is to make sure that we can come up with a good scoring system. We're not going to have a point system, but we're going to have like a baseline of like, you need to answer affirmatively to X number of questions before something can be considered a special site. But then we're going to test our questions against several high quality existing sites to make sure that that the questions are realistic and make sense in the real world. We talked extensively about solar. We actually saw great value in having an ordinance in place before applications come to Albemarle. We sort of understand Kim's point about flexibility and how you get locked in if you have an ordinance, but when you look at localities like Louisa that didn't have an ordinance, they probably wish they had one before they had that big application that caused so many problems. But absent that, we think it's very important that that even if we just have performance criteria, those performance criteria be public, so that the solar industry or potential applicants have access to those performance criteria, so that they have a means of understanding what kinds of applications Albemarle County would accept or be interested in having approved. Some of the things that we thought were very important was limiting forest removal, particularly old growth forests, considering productive farmland, and then also we thought the pollinator-friendly, pollinator-smart guidelines were very important and should be required if we can. Discouraging removal of forests, as I said. We do have the ability to identify old growth forests in the county through aerial maps. I think that's important. Also, highly ranked forest blocks require 100-foot natively vegetation setback from streams. Some of these practices are going on existing ag properties, and so those ag properties may not have 100-foot buffers. And it's important that we expressly require that if they don't have 100-foot buffers, they need to be replanted. And then also vegetated setback from neighboring properties prevent stormwater flowing off that on neighboring properties, as happened in Louisa. Also considering the experience of other localities, addressing decommissioning funds that might be held in escrow, consistent and clear language. You can read the rest. Stream health. You guys, I can't go into all this. We were disappointed that staff chose not to go forward with something closer to the full Chesapeake Bay Act, which would have included some agriculture, which would have included more regulations in agriculture. You can read that to understand where we were coming from on that. Some of the other things that we wanted to go into that we thought were important, and actually just skip down to the ones that we thought were most important. Out of the ones we thought were most, and first I'll say also, I'd like to congratulate Kim and the rest of county staff for doing an excellent job on the presentation. I thought that was very informative. And they addressed many of the questions that we had. We put together minutes before that presentation. So I think many of our concerns were addressed in that presentation. But I say out of the 14, I was very interested to see that actually a lot of the priorities that staff came up with, it seemed mirrored very closely some of the priorities that we came up with. Out of the 14 initiatives proposed, we favored the ones that didn't demand much expenditure of county funding or staff time, but rather set up codes, requirements for education of the public. But out of the initiatives proposed, we did favor, we thought the regulatory requirements, number 1 and 2, were very important. We also thought number 11, which I believe, if I recall right, was the low impact development was also very important. And then 14, 13, and 12. The stream buffer overlay district, as I said, we strongly support that step. One of the concerns is making sure that we actually make progress and not just return to what was done in the past. I think that the combination of 1 and 2 represent significant progress. If both of those were passed. Out of Kim's presentation, I do have to say, one of the questions I had, I know in the Chesapeake Bay Act, some of the language suggests that, suggests that if a buffer doesn't exist, the buffer should be allowed to establish. In other words, if there's mown grass there right now, when the ordinance is passed, that area should not be mowed anymore. It should be allowed to naturally redevelop back into a buffer. And it sounded like in the county presentation that staff was not proposing to adopt that. Could you address that at all, Kim?
Yes, the answer really is I don't know at this point. I think that the way that we've discussed it with zoning with respect to enforcement, because zoning would be enforcing, is that like other districts, I guess, they have non-conforming uses that were there prior to the establishment of the ordinance. And so, you know, that's the way that they had framed it. But it is something to consider, Lonnie. I hear what you're saying, and it's not well developed at this point yet. So I will certainly look at that and think about ways we might be able to incorporate it, because I agree with you. If there is a way to, it would be great. I'm not sure in terms of the practicality of it, you know, how to require, you know, restoration, mitigation of existing impacts. So we can certainly look at it.
Yeah, and we can go into more detail on how I foresee that happening. I liked what was brought up in the meeting about going back to 2014 as the starting point and not going back to 2021. Because that was the area where the ordinance was grossly eroded from its previous state. And I think, but the other thing is, I think if the county had a worst first policy in terms of its enforcement, and I mentioned that before, I think that would be very helpful, so that we're not concerned about every landowner that's maybe mowing part of their buffer. But if you have a large landowner that's mowing basically a lawn for a mile, that should be something the county should focus on and take action. So other things, also non-agricultural use of otherwise agricultural properties. From discussions with county staff, right now they're only enforcing the development footprint of the building sites and not the parcel level. And upon adoption of the overlay district, since if ag is going to be exempt, the concern is if you have residential uses on otherwise agricultural property, what is the area that's going to be included in that exemption? And our proposal was that should be the footprint of the building site plus 2 acres should be brought into compliance with the water protection ordinance at a minimum. I mean, if it was more than that, we'd be fine with it too. But since you can't get land use for, and we understand those definitions of agriculture will probably be different, but since in land use it's 2 acres, it's consistent for it to be 2 acres. As I said, low impact development study, expand watershed education in schools. We thought that was very important. And obviously the committee's own new landowner education project. The stream quality assessment program, that's particularly good because we do have an entire part of the watershed, the Rivanna watershed, doesn't cover the whole county. We have areas like the Hardware that really have very little stream data at all, because the Rivanna Conservation Alliance doesn't do any stream monitoring there. So if the idea of expanding stream assessment, I thought that's a really great investment the county could make, and the committee agreed with that. It was interesting to hear the county supervisor's discussion of septic pump outs and the idea of just requiring something on a property transfer. I was very excited to see that possible movement could happen in that. That's very in line with what our recommendations were as a subcommittee rather. And I think that's it. That's what I have. I would be opening it up for questions, comments, or other comments, other people from the committee who wanted to chime in at all. There's a lot in there. I encourage people to read the full minutes and report.
I'll just thank you guys again for reading all of it and digging in. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make it to the discussion, preparing for the board meeting this week, but I'm happy to have a follow-up discussion about, a lot of these. And implementation is going to be moving slowly, because if you were watching, you saw we were proposing to put in budget requests. And so we won't have the budget approvals until next year. And so it's a little bit of a, long timeline. So we have time to have more discussions about it and hear your feedback some more.
That's great. We look forward to that. And I certainly hope that as we dig into some of these policies, particularly number 1 and 2, and obviously number 13, in some of these, as we dig into the details, I certainly hope that we'll have the opportunity to provide detailed feedback into some of those. Because I think we do have some expertise on the committee that could really provide some good ideas.
All right. Well, I think we are out of time. It's 7:31. So I want to thank the policy committee as well for you guys digging into this. And also it's really great to see your minutes. And I also look forward to having this conversation unfold and getting Kim's feedback as well and hearing that. So
one thing I did want to mention, Christine, do you think it would be, well, and to Kim, would it be helpful, particularly, I think the solar recommendations are probably the closest to being able to deliver officially from the committee to staff. Kim, do you think it would be helpful for the committee to draft something along the lines of recommendations for solar? Are you ready to receive those? Or is our informal input enough at this stage?
Yeah, I can receive those and, provide them to Bill and Scott Clark, who you all know who are working on that. I'm not working on it currently, but I think Gabe would also be interested in that. So, we can, I certainly don't think it would hurt. And we can invite them back to report on progress of where they are with what they're working on.
So,
hey, Lonnie, I don't know what the timeline is on that, but I'm just wondering is there time for us to have another round on the solar, Kim and Lonnie?
Yeah, I think there is, and I would like maybe, now that we've brought this forward to the rest of the committee, I'd like some other people, maybe Christine, I know she's thought a lot about this too, to weigh in on some of the specific language. So I don't know if Christine if you had expressed interest in the last meeting, if you'd be interested in starting the draft of a letter, and then we could all provide some input on it. Does that sound workable?
do you want to do that prior to the next policy meeting, or do you want to have that policy meeting and continue to hash out a more in-depth discussion of this? You could do either way.
I was hoping that we could bring this to that we've had the meeting within the policy committee, unless Kenan feels like we needed more in-depth subcommittee discussion, that we can now bring this to the full committee and start the discussion on a letter with recommendations.
I think it would be good to, I think it could be done just by maybe thinking about it a little bit more and adding something to the Word document, and then, to this document or a similar list, and then give it to the committee, the overall committee.
Okay, so you'd like it to go through the subcommittee again. So maybe I would invite you, Christine, to attend our next subcommittee meeting and
Working group.
Thank you, Kate.
I guess also, I think it could just be done by adding some notes in. I was just thinking that we might want to look at the wording and see if there's anything else that we've missed. And it might just be, we could work by email.
Yeah.
I don't know what the timeline is for this, but it seems like there could be a few more thoughts. I was just during this meeting thinking that, there are a few more things that we could add into that possibly.
Yeah, there's not a rush. As Kim said, I don't think there's a rush on this, but I do think there's interest and willingness to do something now. So I think it's important to not let it languish.
Right.
Should we just schedule another policy meeting and invite anyone who wants to join us, especially Kim? And I mean, if there's reason to do that, it makes sense to do that first.
Yes, I agree. Let's do that.
That sounds good. And in the meantime, I can take those recommendations that you've already laid out and put them into a separate Google Doc. And then Kenan, you can add your thoughts to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then at least we'll have a working document that we can work from.
Yeah.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, great. All right. Well, thank you guys for the excellent meeting, and happy holidays to everybody. Because here we are, the darkest part of the year. And so bring some light into your lives, and hopefully everybody can get out and soak up that little winter sun. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you in 2022, if not sooner.
Hallelujah.
All right. Best wishes to everybody, and be
Happy
safe.
solstice to everyone when it's here soon. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks.
IT, for
Bye.
hanging
Happy
on.
holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.